Jets fans, what's happening? It's your friend Dom C, back for another episode of the Project Prospect Podcast. Just a little deep dive where we're going to talk about some of these draft eligible players here in 2023 and see, who's hot and who's not and who might be good fits for our Jets. So, I try to vary it up for you guys. I try to bring in different perspectives, definitely guys or gals, that is, who have, their finger on the pulse of what's going on with these prospects and these guys. And our next guest is I'm really excited for. It's somebody that, I got to meet in Twitter, and then we got to formally meet down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. And, I've really studied what he does day in, day out since we got to meeting. And, his story is really cool, and his knowledge is even better than that. So I'm so excited to bring you guys John Vogel. Let me bring him on here. John.
Dom, appreciate the intro, man. That's really nice. It's great. I'm gonna have one of these days. I'm gonna have to hire one of you people to just introduce me anytime I walk in a room, walk in a restaurant, and so go through it.
Listen, man, my fee is cheap to be a hype man, so we can talk after this. But guys, John Vogel is the draft analyst for NFL draft BLITZ. He's also the director or the scouting consultant for DreamWorks. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
Yeah, director of scouting for Dreammakers.
Dreammakers. Yep. I'm sorry.
I do the DreamWorks thing too all the time. Trust me, because that's you grow up watching those movies and you hear that combination of words, and that's just what you think of sometimes. So
yeah. So tell us about NFL Draft BLITZ and Dreammakers, if you don't mind, John.
Yeah. So NFL Draft BLITZ is one of these websites. They've been around forever, man. Since 1998, just producing different content. Went through a couple different owners, and the current owner here, Ed Hunt, he reached out to me. I guess it was back in August, and asked if I had any interest in taking a full-time position with him. And I mean, it was pretty much a no-brainer I've always used the website. And so being able to kind of come in and bring my touch to it and produce my content and be able to do that full-time and quit the day job and work on football, and that helped a lot. So it was good. It was really a no-brainer. I took it, and it's been great so far on that front. Now for Dreammakers, we're a player management company. So we work directly with some of these athletes that want to get into the NFL. We help them manage their career with their training, work, hand in hand with agents and stuff, and bring it. So our name to claim, our fame to claim, blah, 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 is we are the partnering company right now with Young Money. And so we have we have, I think, 13 clients right now, and that's a lot of fun getting to know those guys, get to hear their stories, and, ultimately help them become better players in the long run.
Any names that the listeners will be familiar with in the Dreammakers?
Yeah, perhaps. So there's a couple veteran guys that'll be joining into our fold here in the next few days. It'll be announced. But in this draft class specifically, Jackson State, we have two of their players, being Isaiah Bolden and Dallas Daniels. There's Brandon Council out of Auburn that we have, Kyle Sewell out of Arizona State. So some kind of mid-tier, guys that are probably going to get drafted.
Sure.
But they're going to stick around in the league for a while. We have faith in all of our guys and, what they do on a daily basis.
Awesome, man. Awesome. What an experience. What an opportunity, man. You're blessed for sure. And I know that everyone who watches or listens to this podcast is going to, feel the same, be blessed about, your expertise and your knowledge of what you bring to, that keen eye that you have for these scouts. So
thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So like I said, our Jets, the whole quarterback thing is going on. And the last thing I want to do right now is tie up any of your time talking about, quarterbacks, talking about Aaron Rodgers here. We're here to talk about these prospects. So
we can talk Aaron Rodgers. We'll talk about whatever you want, Dom. This is your show, man. So
yeah, I want to really hone on the other side of the ball, because it's an avenue that has quickly thinned out for us for in regards to personnel, and that's our defensive line. in particularly the interior portion, right? We lost Sheldon Rankins, who signed, $10 million deal in Houston. Nathan Shepard, excuse me.
Yeah.
3 years, $15 million down in New Orleans. Those guys were heavy parts of our rotation last year in our defensive line. So as it stands right now, it's constituted here at the end of March. We got Quinnen Williams. We re-signed Solomon Thomas, who's a good rotational piece. We have Tenzel Smart, who spent most of the time last year on our practice squad. We also have Isaiah Mack, who we signed off of Seattle's practice squad, who's a bigger guy, more of a one-tech kind of run stuffer guy. And after that, that's it, man. So I think it's it's gone from a sneaky need to a definite position of attention that needs to be addressed, probably more likely than, in the draft class, bringing in pieces that can be, pipeline rotational pieces eventually, a year or 2 years down the road, step in and be big contributors to Robert Saleh and Jeff Olber's offense. So, the defense that we run, it's predicated on, the front four creating pressure and really being the nuts and bolts of our defense. So, defensive tackle is a definite need. Now, I know that a lot of the Jets fans on Jets Twitter and whatnot, they've watched the Javon Hargraves come off the board and, guys being signed left and right. I have a kind of an inclination that those guys were never going to be in our wheelhouse. We weren't going to play at the top level of the free agent market. I am a little surprised that we haven't brought in any of these, second or third tier, stopgap 1 year kind of deal guys to kind of fill spots on the rotation. But, it just kind of leans more to me thinking that it's an area that's going to be addressed through the draft. So as a whole, before we get into specific prospects, talk to me about your feelings on this interior line class.
There's guys, that have popped out at different points of the season. I think that the biggest problem, overall was consistency this year, right? And it was hard to find guys that were consistent outside of your Jalen Carter, right? Like Jalen Carter is the big name. And I know that there's all the controversy with, the accident back in January. And then he's got apparently some driving issues where he likes to drive at very high rates of speed. Hopefully not anymore. I hope that, everything that's kind of happened is sort of taught him, a lesson in life that's important, which is you don't have to drive fast everywhere. But the biggest thing with this class in general is that there's a lot of potential guys.
Okay.
And so we talked about the combine, obviously. We talked about Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt. Really interesting prospect. I've been saying it, I think I said it last year watching him. I was like, this guy reminds me of Aaron Donald. I'm not saying he's Aaron Donald, but he has a similar size, plays in a similar way, uses his quickness and his hands.
Same college.
Right, exactly. Same college. That's what I was kind of thinking at first. Was oh no, it's just the colors. But the more you watch them, the more you realize they're very similar in the way that they approach the game, the way that they play it in the trenches. Another guy is that we saw blow up the combine was Tommy Adebawe out of Northwestern. Like that guy, once he puts a plan together in his head and knows how to attack a rep, he is going to be a monster. You can slide in as a 3-tech, slide out to a 5. You're going to be able to move him around. Kind of like I think the best comparison for him is Brendan Graham. I think that's the type of player that he is.
Yeah.
So, like outside of those 3 guys, there's a lot of depth pieces, but nobody that really, you go, oh, that's a slam dunk, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that could be really good. The question with you as a Jets fan and the Jets in general is, do you have a first-round pick this year? Like we don't know yet because you're going to have to get Aaron Rodgers, which you're going to have to. You sold out for him.
Yeah, I think that's done. And listen, maybe it takes the first rounder, maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's why you're seeing all these ulterior moves happen in the background to kind of gain an extra second rounder. But I'm going to operate, and this is not the fan in me. This is this is part of the fan in me, but a lot more of the optimist in me that says, I think we're going to get Aaron Rodgers. I think that's definite, and I don't think it's going to cost us the 13. So I'm playing under the assumption that we have 13, but I'm also playing under the assumption that 13 is probably going to be used on the offensive side of the ball more, at the tackle or so on and so forth. Now, but that's a good lead-in and a good, interesting question. Just say for shits and giggles, we're sitting at 13. And Jalen Carter doesn't drop down to us, obviously, even though his legal troubles and immaturity.
He's not going to get past 9. I'm telling you, right. He very well may not get past 6. You know,
agreed. Wholeheartedly agreed. Is there another defensive tackle in this class that you John Vogel, would consider taking that high at 13?
Yeah, and it's the only other guy I think I would go with is Tommy. I would go with Tommy, and it's because first off, I don't like to put a lot of stock into what I see on the combine field, because we call it the underwear Olympics for a reason, right?
Yeah.
You play in pads, not in shorts and in a t-shirt. Now, running a 4.4940 at 280 pounds is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Let's just say what it is. That's ridiculous. That is insanely freaky athletic. Now, I talked to Tommy at the Senior Bowl, and I talked to him at the combine. And my conversation with him at the Senior Bowl was basically, what's your plan when you're going into a rep? You know, because when I watch you on tape, I don't see a plan. He goes, to win. I said, all right, how are you going to win? He goes, any way possible. I'm like, I love the mentality. I said, but you're in a chess match here, right? When you're going up against an offensive lineman, you got to set this motherfucker up. You got to make him feel like he's in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. And the way that you do that is you have to be 4 or 5 plays ahead in your mind and putting a plan together. Okay, how am I going to attack him? I said, you got speed. You go speed to power, go outside, speed to power, speed to power. And then as soon as he starts to feel like this guy's going to beat me outside, he's going to overset. Now you got the hand strength to come back inside counter. Bam, you're inside. You're in the quarterback's hip. Mm-hmm. I said, you got to start working on a plan. And you could see it, you know, in his head, like the gears starting to click, like different things going. I said, yeah, dude, that's the difference between a pro and an amateur. I said, right there is you just got to have a plan. And so when I talked to him at the combine, what's the first thing he starts talking about? I've been studying, you know, these guys over here because I got to figure out a plan. I got to know a plan. I'm starting to work on that. And Beautiful. So you know that he's getting it, right? You know that he's getting it. You know that it's going to come all together, full circle. So I love that about that guy. I'd take him at 13 because you got a freak athlete. You got crazy length. First off, that's another thing. I didn't even mention that yet. That guy's got length the size of a guy that's 6'6", and he's 6'2".
6'1 and a half, 6'2", something like that. I was going to say.
Yeah, so that's the thing is it's like we're talking about crazy length here. We talk about that stuff all the time, right?
Sure.
Arm length and hand size with quarterbacks. And is there an importance to it? Sure, right? But when you've got a guy that's 6'2", not even 6'2", but his arms are 34 inches.
Wow.
What that does is that, and he's 282 pounds, he's going to win leverage battles against very powerful guards and centers. You know, so, and even tackles too. The average NFL tackle right now is 6'5", 305 pounds. Okay. So you take that into consideration and go, okay, I'm going against a guy that's 6'2", 280. The biggest problem that we have with tackles that are 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", is that they don't have a lot of times the flexibility to get down low enough and win those leverage battles. Mm-hmm. You get a guy like Tommy that comes in here, he can win these leverage battles because he's creating that same effect of a tackle that's 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" that you're normally worried about because of the size difference. And he's got the length so that you can't just grab him and just throw him to the ground. So he has all of those tools, right? To where once that plan comes together, he's going to be amazing. So yeah, that's a guy, he's going a lot higher than people have been talking about. I think Mel Kiper or somebody just finally put him in the top 15, said something about it. But no, this is a guy, like, he's going a lot higher than most people realize.
So do you think at 6'1", 6'2", 282, he can play effectively 3 down? Like, you know, I obviously he's got what I see on film of him. He's got a lightning quick step and, you know, like that's his go-to, you know, strong as an ox. Can he hold up against the run? Do you think he can kind of set inside, even in, you know, lined up as a 2-eye or a 1-tech in certain spots? Or does he have that mass? Does he have that anchor? Can he bury down? I mean, the Jets don't 2-gap a lot, so I'm not, you know, necessarily concerned about that. But, you know, Quinnen is Quinnen, and he's, you know, he's not going to move off of the 3-tech spot. So that that counterbalance, if you don't want to go at Quinnen, you know, that they seem to always go the opposite way. My biggest thing with Tommy Adebawore is I love the athlete. I really, really do. I see him being effective as a interior pass rusher, but I question what he can do against the run. What do you think? What did you see?
No, there's some concern there because he's a disruptor, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
He's
Shooter, so on and so
forth.
Yeah.
Right. And so what that can do is, you know, if you pair him up with somebody on the defensive line like Quinnen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just actually talked about this on I think it was a 49ers podcast a couple of days ago. Ted Talks Ball.
Yeah.
But we were talking about offense, like the defensive line, the entire power structure of the philosophy of a 4-man front. Okay, which is you've got 2 interior guys that are going to eat double teams, right? You're going to contain 2 blockers each. Now
Correct.
you got one-on-one opportunities on the outside. You know, so when you see these guys like Dan Orlovsky and I think RG3 does this too. Stop putting tight ends one-on-one with a defensive end. They can't help it. It just happens, right? Yeah. Because you've got the interior pressure. You can let a defensive end slide on the outside and hope that he just doesn't take a good angle and the quarterback steps up in the pocket and has that interior protected, because that interior is the most important part. All right. Even though the defensive end is going to impact the quarterback more directly, right? So, but if you don't have that interior to step up into, you're done. You're toast. So that's the whole philosophy of that. So adding a guy like Tommy right there, he can, while he's a disruptor, right? You have a stalwart that's right there. He's still going to open run gaps, even though he might not make the tackle. That's when you have your linebackers playing, and the Jets do this a lot too, where it's I like to describe it as half field concept, right? Where you play essentially you have 2 mics that play half of the box, and they play downhill. One goes left, one goes right, and you fill those run gaps. So you got a guy like him who's a disruptor. He's going to take blockers with him because he's in the backfield and they're trying to stop him. They're just trying to slow him down. And now as a linebacker, you read that, you come up, you make the play. So I understand your concern with I think that it's very valid what you're saying, which is he's not a great run defender. We don't see him make a lot of run tackles, run stops, but I think that his impact helps your run defense, even though he is a disruptor.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's just kind of born and bred is, you know, we're so used, and teams are so used to having, especially when a 4-man front, you have one of those big hog mollies, those space eaters, those, you know, quote unquote defined run stoppers, and a guy like Adebawore, you know, next to Quinnen Williams, you're missing that. Now, I love the idea. I absolutely love the idea. Like I said, my only concern is what I told you. Like I said, I saw on tape, and you know, he wasn't very stout. I also, like, you know, at Northwestern, he played a lot, you know, outside, did a lot of rushing from the end. You know, I even saw some wide 9, you know, him line up way outside and get at it, which is crazy thinking about it at, you know, 285 pounds, him just hauling down. But that's what 4.49 speed and that first step, that ridiculous first step quickness can do for you, I guess.
And Myles Garrett ran a 4.56, right?
Yeah.
Or a 4.58. It was something like that at 260 pounds or whatever it was. And we all freaked out when that happened to that combine. Just, oh, look at this freak of an athlete. And well, look at this guy. You know, you can play him as a 3 tech.
Yeah.
You might be able to get away with him as a 1 tech. I don't know. I think that he could play 3 all the way outside, like you said, all the way to the 9. But, you know, I might try him at 1. I might see what happens. I didn't see a lot of tape, but I might try him there and kind of be like, hey, you know, you never know. He's a disruptor. It might work.
Yeah, you get 4 guys on the line. Just, you know, hypothetical. You put Quinnen and Tommy rushing from the inside in a passing situation, and a guy like Bryce Huff, who's got that ridiculous bend and a true quarterback, somebody on the other side, true quarterback pressure like Carl Lawson. Like that's a nice little front. Like that's going to give a lot of offensive line and quarterback some fits, you know. Not good fits either. Some frustrating fits. Like I love the idea of it. I absolutely do. So Tommy's one of the guys I want to talk about. I want to bring up another name. It's another guy that I seem to be a little bit more high on than the consensus that I hear or read or follow, so on and so forth. And it's Mazi Smith from Michigan. You know, bigger body, athletic freak. Tell me what you see, and tell me your thoughts about Mazi.
So Mozzie's not a guy that I've studied extensively yet.
Okay.
But the athletic ability is crazy. And some of the testing that he put out before the season even started was crazy. It was insane to see. Now, there's a couple of issues. I think there's some off-field red flags with him, if I'm remembering correctly.
There is. He had an unregistered gun on campus. I know that he got in trouble for, and he also had some sort of driving violation, whether it was, suspended list or something along those lines. So there is some off-the-field stuff.
So that's a guy that potentially is he's a borderline first-round talent that slides into the second, and, worst case scenario to the third. And that's where you go, oh, well, we get a good mentor, somebody around him to take care of him and take him. If you don't get your guy in the second or wherever you're trying to get, that's a guy that you could potentially target. And,
absolutely.
And hope that he's going to stay straight, right? Because that's the big thing with guys is sometimes when they get old. Now, the interesting thing I'm going to throw out here is Michigan has a terrible NIL collective. Okay. I mean, terrible. So a lot of teams, you start to figure out that these guys, if they can handle money or not. I'm going to use a really perfect example, Bryce Young. We know that Bryce Young can handle crazy money and still come out here laser focused on football because he loves it. He's crazy like that. Mm-hmm. So he's not a concern. But Michigan's NIL collective had all kinds of issues this past year, and not a lot of athletes made a lot of money playing in Michigan compared to these other schools. So I think that's another kind of question mark too, as well. If we give him all this money, is he still going to play football? Considering that he didn't make that much, and we had the issues here. Why has he got a gun on campus in a gun-free zone? Why, that's unregistered, mind you, and why is he, especially after this Alabama incident, where some basketball players, that's a very heightened topic right now. But no, I think that you feel confident with the person and that you have the right people around him to make sure that they watch him and kind of teach him, hey, this is how you be a professional. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that there's some good stuff there. Like I said, I wish I'd studied his tape more at this point, but it's just, I think that I wasn't even tracking he was in this class until I saw he was on the combine list, and I went, wait, he's in this class? I thought he went back to school.
Yeah. And why I bring him up after we talk about Adebawore, because I think they are the complete opposite. I mean, what Mozzie can offer as a stout run defender is wonderful. He still's got some work to do. He's still, it still doesn't have that go-to pass rush, although is an athletic freak. He doesn't have that go-to move. He doesn't use his hands well. He doesn't counter well. At least that's the, off of the film that I saw, that's what I see. But, again, perfect fit, I think, next to Quinnen. You got that fire and ice. You got one guy who excels in getting at the quarterback in Quinnen Williams. Not to say he's bad against the run, but his bread and butter is really that inside pressure game. And then you bring in a guy like Mozzie who would, it is completely stout, has the pass rush upside because of his freakish athletic ability, but still needs a little honing into it. For me, he's probably an early down rotational guy. To start with, with a little bit of maturity and nuances and understanding NFL defense and how to really, like you talked about before, setting up his pass rush and his counter moves, so on and so forth. Somebody that I think can, if he can keep his head on straight, can really, really rise through and make a name for himself. And like I said, I think right now, again, now the Jets are void a third-round pick, but they have 2 second-round picks. Are they keeping both of them? Who knows? One might be going to Green Bay. As of right now, they have both of them, 42 and 44, and I think that's prime area for a guy like Mozzie Smith. I think he's a top 50 prospect. I know you said you haven't studied him all that much, but this defensive tackle class, to me, there's not many people that I'm going to place, ahead of Mozzie.
There's a few guys that, so somebody that I might have a bite above him would be somebody like Carl Brooks. Bowling Green. He was
the next guy I was going to talk about.
See,
actually, look at that. Another one of those guys, like I said, Senior Bowl guy, was really good. I have
no idea how he ended up getting a combine snub.
Yeah, I don't get it, but there was a lot of buzz around him, and playing at Bowling Green, he doesn't get the notoriety that somebody who plays at Michigan or in the Big Ten or in the SEC is going to get. But like, if you watch Carl Brooks on film, and it doesn't matter where he is, because he's another guy. Like, I saw him in certain games rushing from a 2-point stance from the outside, playing zero tech in certain formations, so on and so forth. Like, jack of all trades. Maybe he was just that much better of an athlete, versus the competition at that, at Bowling Green versus, the competition he's playing. But dominant. Tell the fans here about Carl Brooks a little bit, because they don't want to hear from me. I've been waxing his name poetic since January.
I've got a late second, early third on him. I think he's a top 60 prospect.
Yeah.
He actually came out of high school as a linebacker, weighed just 220 pounds. He's put on 80 pounds since he's gotten to college over 5 years, and he was a starter immediately as soon as he hit the field there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a long history of playing there. He's got a lot of starts. I'm adding them up in my head as I'm sitting here. 23, 35, 48 starts in college over the last 5 years. So there's a lot of experience there. And then he got the Hula Bowl invite, ended up getting called up to the Senior Bowl. And the thing was, when he kind of got to the Senior Bowl, what I was thinking was he's a power inside 3 tech. Someone who's just going to kind of compress the pocket a little bit.
Yep.
But what I saw at the Senior Bowl is, oh, dang, this guy's got hands, like, oh, this guy could do stuff. Like, he's got speed. He's got quickness. I wish that we could have seen him test at the Combine because this is another guy that, like you said, jack of all trades. He's playing zero tech. I thought that he had a lot of his success as a 3 or a 5.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought that was a lot where I thought when he was a zero tech, you kind of saw he was overwhelmed a little bit. But let's go ahead and shout out the MAC here for a second, because the transfer portal has opened up the MAC and made it a much better conference, because a lot of these guys transfer up from these smaller schools that weren't looked at coming out of high school or just fell through the cracks or whatever that was. They come up, they transfer up into the MAC because the MAC hits the transfer portal just as much, if not more, than any other conference in college football right now. And they get a lot of these guys, and they do a great job with it. Carl's not one of them. He stayed at Bowling Green his entire career, but the competition level is getting better in that conference.
Yeah.
And it's doing so quietly. Not a lot of people realize it. The thing, too, with him that really stood out to me was this is a guy that was he demanded double teams in college. Absolutely demanded them. And if he got one-on-one with somebody, you were in trouble. I thought that he was a good run defender. I thought that, his instincts were good, which is not something that you typically look at in a defensive tackle, but he would fly to the play. Mm-hmm. He's got the consistent progression and production over his career. Every year he got better and produced more. This is a guy that just, he's a top 60 prospect, man. I'm just saying it. I don't know if he goes top 60, but he's a top 60 guy.
Yeah. Do you think his best fit is in an even front, playing inside that 3-4 so on and so forth, or do you see him more as
that's where it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually have him graded as a 3-4 defensive end, right? So someone who's going to primarily play 3 and 4 and 5 and stay in that range. Yeah. I thought that's where he was at his best. He's 303 pounds, 6'3". Maybe there's a little bit of length issue there, because he's not a very long guy, but he's physical. He's very intense when he comes off the line. So he kind of makes up for that lack of length with the intensity that he comes at with his first step. And coming in there, I mean, he's got strong hands and he knows how to use them. So, this is a guy that I would be very interested in. I don't think it matters if you're playing a 4-man, a 3-man front. I think another thing too that, we talked about the 4-man front and the philosophy to it. The one thing that you're going to see a lot more of across the entire league next year is the 5-1 dog is what it's going to be, which is basically what the Eagles did with Hassan Reddick, and having him sort of play as that stand-up guy, but still having 4 men down, because now you bring a 5th man in and you threaten a one-on-one across the board. No double teams allowed. Otherwise, you got a free rusher somewhere. So I think that that's it. With the NFL going to that, a guy like Carl Brooks is going to become even more valuable over the next 2-3 years.
Wow, interesting. I didn't, it's a perspective that I never really thought about. The Eagles, their defense showed up last year. I didn't realize how much change or progress, how progressive they were playing with that defense. I mean, you saw, you've talked about Hassan Reddick and his, he had a great season, so on and so forth. But
yeah, if you don't not count in the playoffs, 16 sacks.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
And then you had 3 other guys with 10+ sacks: Brendan Graham, Josh Sweat. I know I'm forgetting somebody. I can't think of who the other guy was right now. But
Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave.
It might have been Hargrave. I can't remember. But yeah. I mean, saying 4 guys, first time in NFL history, 10+ sacks in a single season. That's insane. And a lot of it was because you go to this 5-man front. And you got a guy like Reddick who could threaten the outside like that and drop into coverage. So it just creates confusion because you don't know what's going to happen as an offensive lineman going through your read.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. Totally. I got 2 more prospects to talk about.
Let's go.
What do you think? Again, I'm focusing in that second round, say, 35 to 65 range.
Yep.
A guy I think fits there and might, again, maybe not. Maybe you think differently. Talk to me, Keanu Benton. You familiar with Keanu from Wisconsin?
Yeah, very familiar with him. Coming into the season, he was my top 1-tech nose tackle prospect.
Gotcha.
I don't know if he's going to end up being the top 1. He might be 2.
Okay.
And so there were some issues that kind of arose this year with, I think some people were kind of worried about his desire to play. Now, I think that he also went through some injuries and stuff. I think he might have been, half-heartedly playing. I know I talked to a couple offensive linemen that played him this year, and they both told me pretty much straight up, no, he wasn't the problem when we dealt with him. He was not a problem this year, and so I don't know if that's the injury. I don't know if that's just him.
Yeah,
but no, when you look at him, like at his size, I think he's like 315, 320 pounds. Excellent athlete. Crazy athletic.
Yeah. Another guy known, and Wisconsin is a little bit wonky. Like, they bring so much pressure from all different areas. Their linebackers from the outside, extra DB, so on and so forth. That those, the interior guys there, or Keanu Benton, was just kind of not really asked to supply much in that regard. So kind of went under, kind of flew under the radar. And the knock on him was always, he can stand up against run. He's very solid, but he doesn't offer anything in the pass rush game. Then you watch him in Mobile again, in shorts and a t-shirt, basically. And he had a nice little repertoire of pass moves. And I think that's when people started to realize that maybe there's something more that he wasn't being offered to show on the field of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think that's why people started kind of trying to figure this out. It's a puzzle, right? Like, yeah, you don't want to we talk about, personality concerns and do they really love football, blah, 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 and this stuff. It all floats around for a reason, right? Which is we're going to invest millions of dollars into a player, and we want to make sure that he wants to do this, right? So I think I do it a lot too when I see, people come out and say, oh, well, so-and-so has, character issues or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or I've heard that he has character issues. And there's a lot of nonsense with that floats around too. But in his case, this was something that people were talking about, that I was chatting with in Mobile because it just wasn't productive this year. It wasn't the guy that we saw in 2021. But again, the injury might have had something to do with that, but I don't know, man.
Let me ask you something, John. So you talked about, like his, there's questions about his desire to play. And we talked about Mozzie previously before with some of the off the field red flags. How does that, like talk to me from an NFL team, from a GM, from a scouting room, like how much does stuff like that come into play? Are there guys, will teams completely take Mozzie Smith off the board because he got in trouble with that gun, so on and so forth? Like how much of that really matters, or how much of that really affects what they're seeing on film when they're watching the guy? Yeah, so we don't want to get overly political, but let's just talk about how different states have different gun laws, right? Okay. And so in a state that might be more gun friendly, say Texas,
Florida, they might not see that as much of a concern, right? Because, oh, well, he didn't do anything with it. He just kept it in his apartment or whatever. Like, that's, some people will not see that as a big deal. Okay. Now, if you're in a more gun, a less gun friendly state, so a place like New York, a place like Minnesota, California, maybe that's something that is more concerning, right? Because you have to take into account where these guys are going to be living. So and then it also comes down to interviews too, right? Like, you got to be around the guy. You got to get a feel for who is he as a person? Is this something we need to worry about? Blah, blah, blah. Also, what's the talent level like? Where's his talent and where does he match up with other guys? Are there other guys that can do what he can? Because if there is, well, they're going to take the other guy every time. And it's business, man. It's business. It doesn't matter what, hey, like, so Mozzie's right there in that second, we're talking about a few other guys around him. There's a really good chance Mozzie gets picked after all those guys just because of those issues and people going, well, we don't really want to take the risk because there's a guy that can do everything that he can right here, So.
Yeah, if they got them in the same tier, on their skill level, and one is squeaky clean and the other one has some off the field issues, it would, as a business, it makes sense to go with the safer option there. So I get what you're saying totally. So
yeah, so that's how you have to look at it too. Is just like, it's a business, right?
Absolutely.
End of the day, you're going to put millions and millions of dollars into people, and you want those. You don't want to be throwing millions and millions of dollars at somebody that isn't going to work out.
Yeah. So back to Keanu. I know we kind of swerved off. I swerved off the road there. You said he was your number one tech, and you're not sure there. What did you see on film that kind of made you shy away from that?
It's just like we talked about the pass rush consistency. I thought that his hands weren't great. He just doesn't know how to use them well. And it's one of those things where if he can develop his hands, like, you've got somebody special, but I used to think naively, obviously I'm 5'7", I'm maybe 190 pounds right now. I'm not a professional defensive lineman, right? So like there's a certain element of that part of the game that is a lot harder for me to understand just because I don't do it, or I've never done it. I can't do it physically. But, talking with coaches and stuff, I used to think that it was very easy to teach somebody how to use their hands. And I've learned that is the hardest thing to teach. When they have hand issues, they've been taught since they were in high school how to use them. And so if they still don't know how to use them, that's a big red flag. So I think that was the first issue, is I didn't see the hand usage. I thought that his win rate was okay. It wasn't great, but his double team win rate wasn't great. I didn't see him consistent. And then obviously the pass rushing issues.
Yeah.
So with the league becoming such a pass oriented league, you want your one techs to even be that too. You look at a guy like Siaki Ika or Jacqueline Roy, like those are guys that they got some pass rushing upside, even though they might not have been productive. They were condensing the pocket. They were putting pressures on the quarterback. And this is a guy that just wasn't, so I think that's kind of the concern is I'll see how everybody kind of grades out. I'm still figuring that part out with some guys, but I'm not sure he will be the top graded person on my board at that position.
Ballpark, where does he fall? Is he top 60, top 75, top
third round
pick?
Yeah, right there. That's probably where he's going to grade out for me, is in that third round range. And it's like you don't typically want to take a one tech too early anyways. And the reason that is because there's not a lot of impact directly that it has.
Correct.
So that's one of those positions that typically slides down the draft a little bit farther. So I think third is probably to be expected. If he's the first one off the board, he might come off, in the late second. Yeah. But I think the third is definitely more in that range for him.
Gotcha. So before we get out of here, tell the people listening here, give us a name that nobody knows. Like who's your sleeper? Who's your real reach? A guy that might be day 3, but he's going to be somebody that is going to make noise in the league next level.
Yeah, so I've got a perfect one for that. Cole Godbout. I guarantee you've not heard anything about him.
I didn't even hear his name. I apologize.
Cole Godbout.
Cole God bout. Tell us about Cole.
So Cole, I've got him projected as a 3-4 defensive end out of Wyoming. And he did not do any all-star games. He didn't do anything. Okay. So that's typically a bad sign. I wasn't even sure if he was going to be in this class, but he is, as far as I'm tracking. He had one more year of eligibility. He had the red shirt in 2018, then the free COVID year in 2020. Mm-hmm. But so he had one more year of eligibility, and I don't believe he's taken it. But this is a guy. So I was talking about him before the season started. I think I put him on my all underrated team back in August, which was a compilation of, like basically 22 players that I thought were criminally underrated coming into this year in terms of draft prospects.
Sure.
So I'll give you Jake Bobo was on that list. Zach Kuntz was on that list. There were a bunch of players like that have popped here and recently that people have gone, oh man, he can play, kind of thing that has gathered some attention. And he was on that list as well. The reason that I had him there was because every time I watch this guy play, he's making plays. Every game that I put on, he's making an impact. He had 70 tackles as a nose tackle. He's really a 3 tech, but he was playing 1 in Wyoming. You might even be able to slide him out to a 5. He's got a really good first step. He's got pretty good athleticism. He's a good tackler. He can pass rush. He had 25 quarterback hits and 6 sacks in 2021 in 13 games. This is a guy, he can play. And I think I'm trying to remember who was I talking to about him before the season started. And I said, this guy. It was Jim Nagy. That's why I was telling him about him. And then I told Jim, I said, you heard anything? No, I haven't heard anything about him at all, blah, blah, blah. 3 days later, Jim tweets about him. I went, see, I knew I wasn't crazy. But, no, Cole's cool. I like Cole a lot. I know that nobody's really talked about him in this There's no way he's getting drafted, I don't think. I think he's going to be an undrafted free agent.
Yeah.
But this is a guy, he gets a chance to get on the field, man. He's going to show out. He's been productive his entire career. He's going to be at the next level too.
I love it. And that just shows like the depth of your knowledge and your skill set and really finding these guys that nobody knows about. Cole, what was the last name again?
Godbout. Godbout. Godbout.
I'm writing that down because when he ends up on a team, I'm going to tweet it right at you, John. So listen, John, we're getting up to the end of it. Listen, I for sure appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking the time to talk ball with me. It's been wonderful. Before we get out of here and close, tell everybody again where they can find you and where your information's at.
Yeah, so you can keep up with everything that I do pretty much on Twitter at DraftVogel. You can read my stuff at NFLDraftBlitz.com. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much wraps up. That's pretty much the 2 main content points that I use. I Vogel too once I figure that out.
Yeah, guys, NFL Draft Blitz, if you really want, and you can drill down and see, John's breakdowns and John's, draft reports and scouting reports on a bunch of guys like Cole Godbout that you won't see anywhere else. And, he's got tons of information. It's top notch, and, listen, he broke down the defensive class or the interior defensive class as good as you're going to hear it anywhere on the internet. Again, John, listen, love the time. I love the chat. It was awesome. I hope to do it again, and I hope to pick your brain about your eye and your kind of techniques to scout some of these guys, because I'd love some of that to rub off on me, man.
No worries, man. Anytime. You just holler at me, man.
John, thanks. Jet fans, listen, hope you liked what we brought you in regards to the interior defensive line. Definitely a position that we're going to attack. I don't know if it's going to be early in the first, second round, or if it's going to be kind of like a day 3 thing. But, we got a good small cross section of some guys that may be fits for our Jets. So until next time, go Jets.